No more
Just a
politics.
fair warning.
No more politics.
Well, we're going to wait a few more minutes. Charlie and Rosemary are not going to be with us. They're on their way finally to see their family. So this is lovely.
And Glenette has family, and so I am the one that's supposed to watch the time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's very good.
So I'm the good guy and the bad guy, depending on which side.
I don't care. It's okay with me. I have this view of teaching as sort of like an accordion. It goes out,
Yep.
and then it goes in, and you leave out things
I'm
you're
in,
really
buddy.
sorry you left them out, but you had to, so it's okay. Yeah, so see, the danger is after you write so much about something, it's really hard to teach about it. I find that my most exciting teaching is when I'm trying to work something out.
Yeah.
And once I've worked it out, I just want to tell everybody everything I've discovered. And I'm not sure this is the proper way to go forward. It's not pedagogically as good as when you're just trying to figure it out.
Well, we're loving it so far, Kathleen. So
Well,
you don't.
thank you. Thank you, Pam. It's
Yeah.
good.
I was interested in a couple of minutes ago, we were talking about someone being deeply authentic. That's interesting. I wonder if our culture longs for people who are deeply authentic and what that might mean to each one of us. It's just, those words just are sticking in my mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
The question is, isn't authentic enough? We have a tendency to put adjectives in front of these things. Words. I mean, if you're authentic, you're either authentic or you're not authentic. I don't know if there are degrees of
No.
it.
So, Eric, it's a language. It's a word that gives a flavor and an experience of something. If someone says someone's authentic and someone says someone is deeply authentic, I have a feel for that. It says something to me. So I think it's more than just straight dictionary information.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, it's, if somebody's sorrowful, but deeply sorrowful, that gives it a slightly different meaning. And I suppose that's the same thing that you're feeling.
Yeah.
I always feel that with authenticism, if that's the right word, I probably made one up.
You did. It's
You're
good.
either authentic or you're not. Either like you're a liar or you're not a liar. Maybe the right word is prevaricator.
I don't know. I think about it differently. I think, forget Genesis. I think it has to do with the depth of consciousness about yourself and your capacity to act from it. And I don't think any of us are fully mature in the Lord yet. So I'm not sure. I think I want to go with Pam about levels of authenticity. And I think I can be authentic in one way and less authentic in other ways. I don't know about that, but
I think you've explained that very perfectly.
thank you. Okay, we have one more minute. Did you receive from John Ryan the assignment I gave you of the image to look at?
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
He said it was an assignment. I thought it was a sort of wonderful comment on the siblings hashtag siblings day. Whoever invented that. Not all families are wonderful.
It was somebody at Hallmark, I imagine.
I think so.
Looks like it's time to start, so we'll let you have at it.
All right. Well, good morning. It's a delight to be back with you. Hi, Lib. Good to see you. It has been a joy to be with you the last 2 weeks. And I'd like to begin by reminding us that it's Eastertide, and we join together in the name of the risen Christ. And I ask that we be as present as we can be to the risen Christ in ourselves and around us and in our world, and that be a gift of shalom or peace among us and around us. So, okay, Genesis. Want to start with any questions before I launch into about 7 chapters worth of talking? Anybody? Yes, please, John.
If you have time, go to chapter 49 and talk about the family biographies there. That just fascinates me.
Oh, wonderful. That's usually stuff that most modern Americans like to skip over. Maybe I should say, well, John, you'll have to remind me in case I forget when we get up that far. So please don't hesitate to remind me. I'd like to begin, though, with some thoughts about how a biblical text can be of use to us. These are ancient texts, and John's question is important about that because that ancient text is really interested in who the members of the community are. That text of identifying each of the 12 tribes by their ancestor and characteristics. And maybe, John, this is just a quick dash into that they're presenting through one person political, economic, and social relationships that existed at an earlier time among the tribes. And so they do that, and it's really important to the community that's being reconstructed through the benefit of Genesis. But because it's ancient and because we are not necessarily apprised of all the history here, the question becomes for the modern believer how these texts address us. And it's very often thought that what we're looking for is the one big unifying theme, the one theological point or the large doctrinal matters that come in some form or other in the text. And I would like to say that that's good and true and great. For example, when we're reading this story, we can read the story as a demonstration of the providence of God. But I want to say that is nowhere nearly enough justice for this beautiful story. And I want to offer some other ways into the story to help it become ours. And I make that claim because we claim that these are the living word of God. And if we do hold to that as communities of faith, then in what way is that so? Is it just the big conclusion that the God is providential to these people in terrible trouble? Well, here's some other suggestions about things we've already looked at, and maybe it gives me a way to review where we've been. For example, I've been trying to highlight the dysfunction in this family. And I go back to the circumstance in particular of Jacob, whose somewhat disordered love arrangements in his family distort what's going to happen to the family itself. So I wonder if these stories are not a mirror to us in our own time of family dysfunction, of his denial, of his jumping to conclusions, and of his inability to see his other children. And then I want to ask that I'm asking these more as questions, but what about the fact that all our ancestors in the book of Genesis, all our ancestors in the faith are immigrants? What bearing, if any, does that have on us as a believing community attempting to live an ethical life in a world that is in such upheaval among the northern and southern hemispheres and at our own borders? So that's another thing for me to think about. And then I ask, how the text addresses us metaphorically or symbolically. So the Siblings Day image shows the brothers lowering Joseph into a pit. And I would like to ask if that metaphor works in any way for you in your own lives, or me. It certainly does in mine. So that's why I land on it. Have you ever found yourself in a pit? Have you found yourself, your family, your community, your country in a pit where it seems that there is no future? It seems that death is at hand or ending is at hand, and there can be no life. And yet, in this story, Joseph's put in a pit twice. And that word, I tried to point out last week, that word gets used again, and then about the prison, implying that that whole world of futurelessness is repeated in his life. And also repeated in his life is being raised up out of the pit, as we began to see at the end of class last week, or the end of our session. I don't want to call this a class. I'd rather think of it as a session or a discussion. So, I'm offering that as a method, an approach, a way to find in texts more than simply our intellectual conclusions. And I think those conclusions really matter. But look at the wealth of what we're missing. So, anybody want to talk back about that, or shall I keep going? All right, maybe there'll be time at the end, but probably not. So here we go. So I want to mention again, the book's audience. I tried to suggest that the stories in Genesis, well, I didn't suggest, I said, the stories in Genesis are addressing a group of people a community of people, a nation that has been destroyed by occupiers, by invaders, by people who've deported them, displaced them, and that's the large historical background against which I am reading Genesis. And I believe Genesis is trying to serve both as a mirror to show them their own story in the stories of our characters, and that it is more than anything trying to encourage the community to gather again as one people, to become again a united family, the family of Jacob. And I, in particular, think the story of Joseph comes late in the book and is markedly different from the earlier stories in a number of ways, because as a little novel, it's trying to show them where they are right, more or less, at the time when the book is being put together. They've survived, they're alive, but they're separated. Some are still in the land. Some are represented by Joseph in exile. And they're captured, they're captive, they're in prison. And they are at odds with each other. Now, for those who are interested in history itself, I'm speculating that this book was put together in its final form, more or less, in the Persian period. The Babylonians have 50 years of rule over Israel, and then they are destroyed, or they're actually taken over by the Persians. And when Persians get in power under Cyrus, they have a different ruling attitude, and circumstances of the exiles change. And the exiles become accustomed to life in the new land. They like it, they assimilate in it, and they acculturate. They become, we could say, they become Babylonians, Persians. And the question is, how will we ever get them back to the land? How will we ever reform this as God's chosen people? So I'm asking that, and I'm observing that at one level, we're trying to read this as a story of characters, really, to me, compelling and interesting people with psychologically challenging circumstances. But then I'm also encouraging us to read it as a book about the history of the people themselves and the struggles they're facing, inviting them to know that the God who created in the beginning will recreate them now. We'll give them offspring. We'll give them a land. We'll give them a name. We'll give them honor. We'll give them, those are all the promises made to Abraham that I've hardly mentioned, but are underlying all of this. Okay, that was page 1. There are about 400 pages here. Okay, now I'm moving. Where we were, if you remember, was Pharaoh's dreams. And I'm wondering, William, do we have my PowerPoint? That's what I'm reading from here. If we can put that up, but if we don't, it doesn't matter. I'll just keep talking. If you remember, Joseph is put in prison. He's kept there for a long, long time. The text wants you to know that this period of suffering, this period when it looks like there's no future, that period keeps going on. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I want to go on now to the next one. And I can do that, can I? Can I do that?
I don't control my screen, but I do have you as a host if you want to.
I would like to.
If you could open that up, I'll let you share.
Oh, how do I do that?
Do you have your PowerPoint open?
No, never mind. Let's just keep going and you be in charge. And I'll just give you little commands.
All
Does that
right.
work for you?
That is fine.
All right. I hope it works for everyone.
Me.
Okay. So back to that. Okay. So I want to go now. Okay. So where we are in the story is that the cupbearer has been restored and forgets about Joseph. So he's still there longer. But then happily, coincidentally, providentially, Pharaoh has dreams. And in those dreams, he has cows and corn, and the same thing happens. And I don't want to linger over these dreams. You can read them yourself, and they're probably well known anyway. So, William, next one, please. Thank you. This is just one of them, and I like the artwork. That's why I want to show you this. This is the absolutely wretched cows. They're famine cows eating the healthy cows, and that's just like the corn. There's good corn, and then there's shriveled corn. So from this, Joseph interprets and says, "Aha! This means that there's going to be 7 good years with plenty harvest, abundance, and then there's going to be 7 bad years." And then here is this wonderful thing that he does. He says, he reveals this to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is so happy because none of the Egyptians can interpret his dreams. And he says, who brought the cows? He says, Joseph. Okay, calm down. Joseph says to Pharaoh, not only are these the dreams, it would be useful for you to appoint an overseer, a famine czar, who could guarantee the gathering in of abundance in the good years and then distribute things in the bad years. And Pharaoh is so impressed with this young man. Pharaoh then raises him up. Could we go on to the next one, please, William? And then the one after that. We need a discerning and wise man to do that. And who could that be? But this immigrant, this prisoner, this one who has been dragged up out of jail and just interpreted the dreams. And so then there's this huge amount of hoopla about Joseph. He is given all kinds of new clothes and symbols of his power. He is made second in command to Pharaoh, just the way he had been in Potiphar's house, and then he was in the prison. Now he is again raised up to a position of authority and power, second only to Pharaoh in all the land. Now, here's something else I notice about this story that fascinates me. Joseph is Egyptianized, not unlike, I think, the Israelite exiles who are in under Babylon and then Persia. He's so Egyptianized, he gets an Egyptian name. He's given a noble wife named Asenath. I'll show you her picture in a minute. Then he has, when people come by, they're going to kneel down in front of him. There are all kinds of chariots given to him. So he goes from as low down as you can be, a prisoner, and now he's second in command to Pharaoh because, why? Because he's an interpreter of dreams. Now, you know the story, he stores the grain. But then he has two sons by Asenath, an Egyptian woman, and he names them in a way that is psychologically loaded. The first one he names Manasseh, and I've given you the translation here on my PowerPoint. God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. So this is not an uncommon story of immigrants. I'd say it's my Irish family. We don't know the stories from the past because there was so much suffering. Let's forget it. I think that's our interpretation. Immigrants often, although not as much as they used to, come to a new place and they have to forget the past, all the suffering to survive in the new place. Now, he adds to that, God has made me fruitful. That's the name of Ephraim. That's a play on words for being fruitful. God has made me fruitful in the land of my misfortunes. And then you will recall in the story, all the world comes to Joseph. First, William, next one, please. This is Asenath shows up in a DreamWorks movie called The Prince of Egypt. I have never seen the movie, but I was looking for artistic pieces about Asenath, and there she is, and it's perfectly apt. Okay, William, please go on to the next one. Okay, so we've just left Joseph in Egypt, and the camera now moves from Egypt back to Canaan. And we're seeing Jacob and the remaining brothers. They're starving in the famine that has struck the whole land. Joseph, meanwhile, has been gathering grain, and he's been gathering much from the people of Egypt, and so they have grain, and all the world must come. Jacob, in chapter 42, insists that the older brothers, go down to Egypt and get grain, get in the line of immigrants, of refugees, of displaced people. I'm not sure the exact term to use here. And they must go and get food to bring back to the family. And his command is that we may live and not die. Now, of course, it's about the famine, but it's also about the community. Will this community live and not die? And as I've mentioned previously, living and not dying is what one would expect in the ancient world under these invading and occupying powers, that the people of Israel, the children of God, are going to be absorbed in the occupying territories. So this is the question of multiple layers. Okay, so William, next one, please. I don't remember what we have. Okay, I do want to point out that Joseph, let's see, no, Jacob will not allow baby Benjamin to go on the journey. Why? Here we have the same problem as before. He's overprotecting one child and not caring about the others, but that's okay. He's young. We don't know what his age is. He's young. Let's protect him. So now we have the community left in the land coming down into the place of exile, and they come before Joseph. And if you've had a chance to read it, I think this is one of the most fraught, dramatic moments in the book, because they're standing before him. And if you remember back to the dreams in chapter 37, they were told it was implied that they would be bowing down before him. Now they do not recognize him. He recognizes them, and what are they doing? They're bowing down before him. So amazing, dramatically. They're bowing down before him with no recognition of what the larger picture is here. He recognizes them. He understands their Hebrew. He continues to speak in Egyptian. He is disguised. They don't know who he is. And now, here's the question I want to ask everybody looking at the story. What should he do? What do you think he should do? Forget what he does. What do you think he should do? What do you think you would do if this kind of circumstance were in front of you? You're now in charge of the world, and in front of you is your family that's supposed to love and support and care for you, and who did everything in their power to destroy you. And now there they are, and they are in need, and the vulnerability has flipped around. They are the vulnerable ones. And if we had a lot of time, I would go around and ask all of you to tell me what you think you would do. Some students say they would just get revenge immediately. Some say they think he should be hung. They brothers should be hung or imprisoned or all these other things. But Joseph, what does Joseph do? Joseph doesn't do any of those bad things. William, can I have the next one, please? Poor William, he can't go back to sleep while I'm here. Okay, I want you to see this painting. It's done by an American named Tony Ciani, and it is the picture of their confrontation. And so you have this wonderful representation of Joseph up here on his high pulpit, his high throne, and it's over against the cowering brothers who are coming in search of food. And you can see their vulnerability, their terror, their concern about their future. And there you have Joseph. So we'd like to think that we'd all be Christian and we'd immediately give them whatever they needed. And we'd fess up and say who we were. I probably would, because I just couldn't bear holding it in. But he doesn't. He wisely, as an abused child, with memories of his abuse and the consequences of that abuse, he does not. He sets out to see whether or not they have changed, whether or not the attitude of hate and murderousness in the brothers, their self-concern, their narcissism remains with them. And so he sets up some convoluted, I hope some of you at least had a chance to read it. He sets up some convoluted tests for them. But the first thing is he's interrogating them and asking, well, tell me who you are. And they say, well, we are 10 sons of a father who in his old age, he has another son. He wouldn't let him come. Our father is old. He is, I forget what else they've said about him. Let me see if I have it written down. I don't know if I do. He learns that his father is alive. He learns that there's still a brother back home. And he keeps testing them about who they are. They do not know, because he's working through a translator, that he understands everything they're saying. They think he's dead. This is where I was headed. We have one who is no more. That brother is no more. So now we understand how these brothers are convinced of death of the brother they betrayed, and the possibility of recognizing is almost non-existent. So if you would go on, William, please. Joseph sets a trap for them. He sets two, really, but the first one is if you cannot come back until you bring the younger brother to prove to me who you are. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, I think, from a dramatic point of view. But in the meanwhile, he imprisons all of them and then keeps one of them in jail. Why does he do that? He does that to see if they're going to betray Simeon, the one they leave. And he insists that they cannot come back for food unless they bring back Benjamin. And so they talk among themselves, and it's a difficulty. So, William, would you mind turning again, please? So they go back to their father Jacob, and here's where Jacob's inability to grieve, his inability to face all of the suffering in his family, controls the narrative. They go home without Simeon, so they've left him there. Joseph has provided for them. He even put money in their sacks on their animals, And Jacob hears the report and says, "You're not going back with Benjamin. Benjamin is not going." The oldest son, Reuben, remember him from chapter 37, he tries to change Jacob's mind in about the cruelest way you can imagine. He says, if I go down and come back, and I don't have Benjamin with me, you can kill my sons. So you can be glad anyway. He's not a very wise negotiator with his father. Would you go on, please, William, to the next one? So
That the split between
you
the
can't
first
see it.
one.
It's a black. It's black. It doesn't. I can see that you can't see it. How about go on to the next one?
I think we might have run out of that slide. So let me share the.
Oh yeah, I sent that to John. There's a second one. 30. Yeah. No. Well, hi everybody. I'd rather see you anyway. So I'm going to keep going. Oh, okay. Here's the question. How can Joseph trust his family again? And then the next one, please. Okay, so we're still back in Canaan, Israel, and okay, we did this one already. Next one. This is why I had to retire. I can't stand using these things, but okay, so now the famine in the land has gotten so much worse, and they have nothing. Their death might be imminent. They have no possibility of thriving. They may not even survive. So, and the text wants to tell us in chapter 43, it uses the word kabod. Famine is heavy in the land. It's deep, it's thorough, it's heavy. And so Jacob wants to send them to Egypt again. And now Judah, you remember Judah was the one who said, let's not kill him, let's sell him. Judah now, who becomes the forefather of the southern kingdom of Judah itself, the nation that's now been destroyed, Judah speaks up and says, no, he won't let us come. We won't even see his face unless we bring our brother. And now look at poor Jacob, who's also known as Israel. Jacob Israel replies, why do you treat me so badly? So here we have this patriarch who's taken the whole thing and turned it on himself. He's made himself the victim because they let on to this man, this Pharaoh assistant, they let on that there was another brother. And that brother is so precious to him, that child, that he can't see anything else. So they keep repeating this. And Judah says, well, if I don't come back with him, then I will be guilty before you my entire life. And then I want to read what Jacob finally says, and which is a pivotal point in the narrative. Chapter 43, verses 11 to 15. Then their father, Israel, Jacob, said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the fruits of the land and bring it to the man. Take double the money, carry back with you the money he put there. Take your brother also, and be on your way again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, that he may send back your other brother, Simeon, and Benjamin. And now here's the point. As for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So the men did this. They went down. Something changes here in Jacob himself, that he can see his own attachment to one child endangers the entire family. And so he is able to accept, I think that, pastorally, this is an important moment in the story. He's able to accept that he might suffer in huge ways, but it will be for the benefit of everyone. So they head out. So William, please, may I have another change? Joseph has another test. I'm going to just say it in 2 seconds. It's kind of funny though. They come back, and they have Benjamin with them. Benjamin, uh, so they have this exchange. Joseph still does not admit who he is or acknowledge that he knows who they are. He has to keep going in and out of the room where he's meeting with them because he wants to weep and weep and weep, and he can't do it. And he still has this test. He has to see if they're going to mistreat Benjamin. So he has his servant put a divining cup into the sack of Benjamin. Then the family is going back to Canaan with food, and the servant, is the steward, is sent with the divining cup to hide, or has hidden the divining cup, and now has to go and accuse them of having stolen Joseph's divining cup. Divination was something that was practiced in the ancient world, although the biblical text is unhappy about it. They think it's not legitimate. But at any rate, of course, this is a setup. This is a trap. The innocent child is now the one in whose sack is found the cup. So now they all have to go back, and as every time they go back, they fall on their face and bow before him. And now they're pleading with him. And the story changes. I hope I'm not going too rapidly. The story changes effectively when Joseph has now accused Benjamin. Joseph is ready, and they have said, the brothers have said, in whosever sack this is found, let him die, and the rest of us will be your slaves, because they know they didn't take it. And so Joseph has maneuvered this. So the exact same trauma that he experienced is now being portrayed in the life of his younger brother. Now, a lot of students say, oh, that's so mean. And I suppose it is. But it's also a way to find out if these people have in any way changed. Because now Judah, in chapter 43, verses 18 to 34, Judah stands up with the longest speech in the Old Testament, and he describes the plight of their father who's already lost a beloved son. And if now he loses Benjamin, he will go down to Sheol in sadness, in despair. It will kill our father if we cannot bring him back. And then Judah offers himself instead of the child. Now, Joseph is listening to this account. He's hearing what's going on. He's listening to them, and he sees in this speech, he sees that Judah at least has become a kind person, no longer thinking only of himself. He has compassion for his father. He has compassion for the child, and he offers himself. So, like Jacob, who has seen something bigger than his own needs and his love, now we see Judah able to reach out of his own world to love his father, love the family, and offer himself for the sake of the family. So you have a moral, sort of a moral change that seems absolutely evident. And so it's at that moment in chapter 45, of course, finally, Joseph, where am I? Chapter 45. Joseph, if you want to follow along, I'm in 45. William, could we have the next one, please? Okay, maybe the next one. That's the one I just talked about. Okay, so here's Joseph in 45. He could no longer control himself before all those who stood before him. And he cries out to the Egyptians, go far away, everybody leave us. So he's alone now with his brothers. And he's weeping so loudly the Egyptians hear it, and all the household of Pharaoh hears it. And Joseph says to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But it's just so much fun for me to think about putting yourself in the brothers' situation. They're completely nonplussed about this. No, that's not the right word. They're completely shocked, traumatized by the fact that standing in front of them is the brother they thought was dead, the brother they thought they killed, the brother that they too have been carrying guilt about, as they reveal in some of their audiences before Joseph himself. And so they can't talk. I am Joseph. Is my father alive? And then he says, come closer. They came closer. I am Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, remember, Joseph himself was somewhat obfuscating this when he was talking to the cupbearers in the prison. He said, I was stolen from my family. But now he too is coming into his own story with more fullness, or at least the writer suggests that. Don't be distressed or angry with yourself because you sold me here. Look at what he's doing. He is not covering up what they've done to him. He's not covering it up. He's not denying it. But he's got a bigger picture for it. He has a reinterpretation. He has a larger narrative that embraces them all and alters the future and opens the way to reconciliation, which is truth-telling, and then a larger interpretation, which is what victims of disaster and trauma have to do. God sent me before you to preserve life. So now he's looking. This is when I said, I don't know, I remember talking 2 weeks ago about how I think faith is, among other things, looking back over our shoulders at the life that has gone on behind us, that we've lived through, and now he sees it differently. The famine in the land these 2 years, there are 5 more to go. God, I'm looking at verse 7 and 45. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. Now, that's kind of an amazing leap from the details of self-focused suffering into a larger world of faith, of confidence, of hope, a sense of moving beyond the particulars, the closed world of suffering, into a world that embraces the whole family. Now, I'd like to, I think to me this is exceedingly moving, not only because it's good drama to me, but because it does what victims of trauma and disaster require in order to move through what's happened to them and move toward thriving, to find a larger theological framework in which to understand life. Now, God sent me to preserve a remnant, to keep alive survivors. So it was not you, but God who sent me here. God made me a father to Pharaoh, the Lord of his house. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down and do not delay. You shall settle in Goshen, and I will provide for you there during the 5 more years of famine. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how I am greatly honored. He's not bragging. He's being a man of the ancient culture where honor in the family, honor of the individual is honor of the family. And he is able to tell his father, our family is honored. He's able to tell the Israelite survivors of the occupations and invasions that they are honored. This is a story about them. So, okay, I'm honored. And then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and everybody wept, and they kissed each other, and they've got to still be crazy about all this. This is just like mind-boggling for them. So this is the moment of revelation, and it's the moment of fulfillment. If you remember, again, back in chapter 37, when Jacob sends Joseph to go see about the shalom of his brothers, and a strange character just was walking around, and he says to Joseph, "What are you looking for?" And he says, "I am looking for my brothers." That anticipation is now brought to another dimension of importance here. He's looking for his brothers. He's looking for the shalom of his brothers. And now this is to me theologically very rich in our own society. The victim becomes the savior. The suffering one becomes the one who brings healing and wholeness. Now, I've been thinking about that a lot, especially when I think of our racial conflicts and the suffering of peoples of color, especially African Americans. I see this as an insight, since I find in communities of faith of people of color the most extraordinary liveliness, wholeness, welcome. Now, I'm sure that isn't true everywhere, but I think so much about this story in light of that. Okay, so now I'm going to pause here and breathe and see what you want to say, and then I have a lot more to say. I'm breathing very well. Somebody's hand up? Do I see a hand? Yes, please.
Kathleen, I don't want to reduce this story of providence, but I wonder how providence and simple human maturity overlap here, in that all these brothers have grown older and presumably wiser, as people can do. That's an act of providence, I suppose. The story would certainly say that, but it's also a common story of maturity.
I think that's a lovely comment, and I don't find it reductionist at all, and it gives me a lot to think about. So, what it provokes in me is a recognition that the fundamental Christian doctrine that out of death comes life is also a factor. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's also a factor sometimes in nature. So people have a hard time; they don't believe in anything, but they get new life, and life begins again for them. Some people think America is at that stage right now; others don't. So I don't think that our faith suspends natural things. I think it adds another dimension to human events, and I hope that's the case. Does anybody else have a thought about that? Yes, please,
Kathleen,
Susan.
I think kind of building on what Bill said,
Bill.
it seems to me that God has used something terrible that has happened and made it for good. And in our own lives, I think when we suffer or have loss, it gives us a sense of hope that maybe God can take this loss or suffering in our own life and use it for his own purpose. And I think this must have also resonated with the exiles in Babylon, that somehow they felt their whole world had been destroyed. They'd been abandoned by God. And yet God is showing through this story of Joseph, who was abandoned by his family and sent into exile, just as they have been,
Mhm.
that God can use that for good and give them new life and new hope. And
Thank you. Thank you. Agree. Anyone else? Okay, we're not at the end of the story, and the story becomes looser at this point. That is, the pieces of the story seem to not have the same kind of narrative unity or thread that I've tried to show this far. And one of the reasons is that we still have further issues to solve. And one of them is, the coming down of Joseph and Jacob reunite, the coming down of Jacob and Joseph, his son, reunite, and it's quite beautiful. And then Joseph has his two sons. If you recall, they have symbolic names. The two sons then are going to be blessed by Jacob. And we get this interesting story of Joseph mixing up firstborn and secondborn. And he blesses them, but it's not just an ordinary blessing. It's a blessing where he adopts Ephraim and Manasseh as if they were his own children, as if they were skipping a generation. They are no longer his grandsons. They are now part of the 12 tribes. And it's related to the question John was asking about those tribal pictures at the chapter 49. The behind this story are circumstances in the history of Israel where tribes are continually and frequently competing with one another. Some are successful, some are not. There's historical and economic differences. And so you can't even say that there's only 12. In fact, when you have these two, if you look at all other lists in the Old Testament of the 12 tribes, that they vary as to who's among them. Here, the two sons born in Egypt are raised to the level of tribal ancestors and as the direct sons of Jacob. Now, why does that matter? Well, historians are very interested in that. I'm only mildly interested in. I'm deeply interested in the fact that during the return period under Persia, as the exiles are beginning to return to the land, the Ezra and Nehemiah want to cast out the foreign-born wives and children to go back to the land of Canaan, to form the nation. So there's this effort to say, well, to be part of Israel, you've got to be an Israelite. You can't be foreign born. But here you have Jacob blessing the foreign born sons, and they're not just given a blessing like God be with you, they're raised up in status as if they themselves are the tribes. So the narrative, in my opinion, is debating and refuting and challenging those in the period of Ezra and Nehemiah who are trying to cast out foreign wives and their children. Now, one of the reasons for casting out foreign wives, they said, is because foreign wives have other gods and they'll be bad for our community. And besides, they're not our blood. Well, this is putting that under a microscope, which comes out saying, no, that's not true. Jacob himself blessed and included the foreign-born. Now, that problem, in another passage that most modern readers like to skip, where is it? We have a genealogy. Is it the end of 46? Oh yeah, 46. Verses, let's see, where does it start? I don't know. Oh, it's verse 8, if this interests you. In chapter 46, verse 8, Jacob has come, the children are blessed. I think that's happened. And now we get a list of all the people who are Israelites who are in Egypt. Now, this, of course, is leading us into the next book, the book of Exodus, whole other story. But this is how they get down there. And so we're going to get a census or a genealogy of who's there. And there's a lot of details here that that might be very boring to you. But for the ancient readers, the genealogies were among the most important part of the book because they said who's there, who's in, who's out. And want to highlight that by saying this is a kind of odd genealogy in the book of Genesis because it's very interested in the first mothers. Let me find it. These are the names of the Israelites, the ones who came to Egypt. So we get Reuben and all his kids. We get Shaul, who's the son of a Canaanite woman. Oh, a foreigner. Okay. The children of Levi, we get their names. Onan, all these people. And the children of Issachar, blah, blah, blah. Then look at verse 15. These are the sons of Leah. That's one of Jacob's wives. She was the concubine, the slave. And she bore them, these children, including Dinah. So we get a woman here, the daughter, in see chapter 34 to learn about her. Then all these other children, the children of Zilpah. Then we get Rachel and her children. Now we get omitted from this the wives of all of Jacob's sons except one, Joseph, who's married to Asenath, an Egyptian. So we can keep going here. The children of Rachel, Bilhah, Lilvah, 7. Okay, they're all belonging to Jacob, who came into Egypt, who were his own offspring. And now we get the wives of the other sons are simply summarized. So I'm trying to show that I believe this genealogy is not just telling you who's there, it's also making another argument against casting out the foreigners, the strangers, the ones who are not members of the community. So, okay, anybody who wants to speak up, speak right up. So now the famine's still going on. And it's pretty hilarious because what Joseph does is he acts like a really clever exploiter of the Egyptians. He has taken their grain. After they don't have any more grain he's taken all their grain to start with. And now to get grain in the hard years, they have to buy it back from him. So they give him their money, they give him their cattle, and they finally sell themselves into slavery through Joseph for Pharaoh. So to me, this is an element of a folk tale in which our hero, this poor guy from Israel, who's been sold by his brothers, put in the prison, is now raised up, and whose family in the next chapter is going to be enslaved by Egypt, is now enslaving them. So I think that the Israelites hearing this story are laughing out loud. Now, John inquired about chapter 49. And John, there really isn't time to tell you about all of these things. But it takes each member, each tribal member, each head of the tribe, and tells us something about them, some lengthy, some not. It tells us something about them that's related to the history of Israel. And you can see who's in and who's out as history unfolds. And the person who gets the most attention is, of course, Joseph. And then a brief mention of his brother Benjamin. But Joseph is the hero of this story. At this version, he's a fruitful bough. He's got lots of children, and he's a warrior. And by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you. That's the key here. By the Almighty who will bless you with the blessings above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and womb. Of course, that's children are going to be born to you. All right, I'm going to have one more sentence and I'm going to stop.
Well, Kathleen, I want to get
Please.
in on that. The thing that struck my attention was you get baby brother Benjamin at the end, one verse, and he is a ravenous wolf.
Yeah, he is. They're all bad guys. So you could say, John, that whatever this story is, wherever this comes from, that it stands here as an indication that the shalom and reconciliation in the family is not total, because they are still fighting with each other historically. So this is a story that's trying to invite reconciliation and at the same time records their differences. But he's a wolf. We don't know what that means. In the kingdom of Judah, the Israel that's left, there are two main tribes, and one is Judah and the other is Benjamin.
Yeah.
So they're obviously having difficulties, and the Judeans were probably, first of all, around Jerusalem in the city, and the Benjaminites are considered in the north. So we might have had some kind of urban rural issue. I don't know, but that's all I can tell you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I did want to point, because we have 2 minutes left, I did want to point to the ending in chapter 50, where we get a reiteration of the providence of God. The brothers, now Jacob has died, so the brothers really don't trust Joseph. They think now that Jacob's dead, Joseph is going to enslave them. And Joseph says, who am I? Am I in the place of God? He doesn't deny what they've done to him. He just says, I give that up. I'm not going to be your judge. Even though you intended to do harm to me, truth telling, you intended harm. God intended it for good, to preserve a numerous people, as God is doing today. So the reading audience, or the listening audience, I guess, the listening audience is being called back together in an image and a story of forgiveness, and a story that takes it into a much larger frame of reference. So,
Kathleen, thank you ever so much for an interesting, instructive interpretation of that book in the Old Testament. And promo, next week, we have Rabbi Barbara digging into similar territory. She calls it Hebrew Bible. We call it the Old Testament. And we'll start a 3-week series on information from Hebrew Bible, which I'm frightened to read that this was addressing texts in which critique of male behavior can happen. And I plan to tune in anyways, and we hope that many of you also will. But once again, Kathleen, thank you ever so much for stimulating conversations and information regarding our Old Testament.
well, it was my delight to be with you. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time at the end to talk a little more. Thank you, and blessing of new life for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
That
My
was
pleasure.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.